Evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, the countdown's on as candidates scramble to make their final pushes ahead of next Tuesday's midterm elections, which are now just 3 days away. Well, tonight, we're getting some statewide elections feedback back from Capital New York's Ozzie Paypara and Jimmy Vielkind, and Politico reporters Alex Seinstad's going to give us his take on the national election outlook coming up a little bit later on the program. We'll also have some of the RFL endorsements for politicians across the region. But tonight we begin with New York's race for governor. Governor Cuomo currently has, by most estimates, about a 26-point lead over his Republican challenger, Rob Astorino. Cuomo's campaign seems to be virtually unshaken by the Moreland mess and the latest controversy surrounding his response to the Ebola crisis and the 3 different positions in seemingly 72 hours. Green Party candidate Howie Hawkins, he's sitting at 6% of the vote. Now, speaking of statewide races in New York, in the race for AG, Democratic incumbent Eric Schneiderman, he's leading his Republican challenger, John Cahill, by about 20 points, 55 to 35%. And if anything, that lead has grown here in the last month. All right, let's bring in our panel. We're now joined by Capital New York reporters Jimmy Vielkind and Ozzie Paypara. We're also joined by 2 regular guys here, senior political correspondent Andrew Whitman and political journalist and author Dominic Carter. Okay, first of all, to scare the audience here, we got 5 guys dressed as political journalists that'll really put the kids in a scary mood. All right. We knew the governor was a prohibitive favorite going into it. We knew he had a lot more money. We knew that he had a lot more name recognition. We knew that a lot of people were afraid of him in the state legislature, so they weren't going to cross the line or even Republicans stand up for the standard party bearer. But what, if anything, Jimmy, surprised you about how this has played out to this point? Has it been some missteps by the governor, or has it been just how afraid Republicans are to cross him?
You know, I think that there have been a few things that surprised me, really. I was surprised by the level of left flank discontent that we saw. It started at the Working Families Party convention in late May. Yep. We saw it go with the Democratic primary challenge lodged by Zephyr Teachout, the Fordham law professor, who got about 34% of the vote against Cuomo. And now what we're seeing is a surging, or relatively speaking, surging Howie Hawkins, who's now pitching himself as the last progressive standing, looking at the fact that Cuomo appears on the Working Families Party line, having nudged Teachout off with that pledge on the state Senate. I've also been interested to watch Astorino. I think Astorino got some huge openings over the summer, particularly when the New York Times really laid bare the extent of the Cuomo administration's interference with the Moreland Commission to investigate public corruption. Astorino seized on this. He's been criticizing the governor, but I feel, and I've taken some blowback from Astorino's people about this, I feel that his message has been a little bit too critical, and he hasn't really pivoted to a more proactive vision for what he would do if he's governor. He keeps attacking the governor, and we're not hearing nearly as much from him about his plans for taxes, his plans for job creation, his support, he believes, an economic boon of supporting and legalizing natural gas hydrofracking in upstate areas. So I was surprised that Astorino didn't fully capitalize on a few of the breaks that he was given. Yeah. And at the same point, as you alluded to, what we've seen is the Republican establishment far from coalesce around him. I believe I was here in May. We were talking at the GOP convention and said that was going to be a big trick. Would the existing power structure in the New York State Republican land line up behind Astorino?
And not only did it not line up, but Astorino even went after some. And there was some ugliness with the Astorino campaign and some of those Republicans. But I got to admit, Andrew was like, oh, Teachout's going to crack whatever. And Dominic and I were looking at him like maybe, Halloween started a little early for Andrew. He was right, though. But was that more of a reflection over the style or the substance of Cuomo? Is it that people, Democrats, are even tired of being under the boot by him, or that he's really off-putting or keeps him at a distance? Or has it really been on economic policies the left has just had and they've felt left down for 4 years?
It's a little bit of both. People who get strong-armed by the government, who get strong-armed by this administration, would naturally want to support an alternative. What we saw after the Occupy Wall Street movement in New York City, which is being credited for laying the groundwork for Bill de Blasio's mayoral campaign, for Elizabeth Warren in the Senate, is the idea that being progressive is defined more and more on economic issues. And Andrew Cuomo has been caught in a very difficult position. He's cast himself as two things that are somewhat incongruous, right? A progressive as a working families candidate would want to be. He has said that he wants to make New York the progressive capital of the country, but he's also tried to make the argument that he is bipartisan, that he works across the aisle, that he works with a Republican-led state Senate. Well, how do you have a progressive and someone that is bipartisan that can reach across the aisle? Brian Lara at WNYC had sort of, observed that this is a similar formula that Barack Obama had sort of pitched himself as someone who was more progressive than Hillary in 2008, but also someone that was post-partisan and that could move beyond those fights. And we saw how good that happened. It didn't. So Cuomo was being caught in the position of working on social issues progressively, but Democrats are now taking that for granted and saying you have to do economic issues, and that's where he's having trouble.
But Dominic, for me, I felt there was so much fatigue from voters 4 years ago after, the fiasco of what happened to Spitzer, and then the not ready for prime time governorship of then Governor Patterson. They wanted somebody who was just going to get stuff done. For 3 years, people seemed pretty happy. Not everybody, but pretty happy that the governor got budgets done on time here. He seemed to get things done. Maybe he didn't do it with a warm hug, but he got things done. It seems really in the last 12 months that people have said, you know what, I'll go actually on record here and say I'm not happy with him, or I'll confront the governor. Is it really just been lately, or has this been an undercurrent for the last 4 years that the left has said, we expected something different than we got?
But here's my question, Richard. Are we really surprised at the stewardship of Governor Cuomo? I mean, we all knew his personality going into this. And so I've listened carefully to what my colleagues have just said, but I give him a lot of credit for, we can't just minimize those budgets on time. I know you guys remember what happened in this state prior to Cuomo, and as far as the budgets coming in, the troubles that Pataki had, and some of Andrew's father in the late term of his tenure. What I'm trying to say is that the political establishment knew what we were getting, and yes, in Albany, in my opinion, they're more afraid of this governor than respect. And it just seems like as of late, people are willing to come out and say exactly that.
You're right in that. Particularly with voters, there's a basic narrative of the state capitol that, as you point out, Dominic, for 20, 30, maybe even 40 years was they fought, they put it off, nothing got done. They bickered, and it remained broken. Cuomo changed that basic narrative into, we did it. We did something. I took the deal on ethics reform. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't everything I want, but we got it done. The budget had some things that were good, some things that were bad, but we passed it on time. We had a tax compromise package. The left likes some of it, the right likes some of it, but we did it. After so many years of a lack of achievement, and Rich, as you pointed out, with the Patterson administration providing the perfect foil for Governor Cuomo, he's pushed that basic narrative of accomplishment. It's a bipartisan narrative of accomplishment.
But he's not running against David Patterson. He's running against he's running against Rob Astorino, and who was running against Zephyr Teachout. It seems like he just decided to stand pat this year on the accomplishments that he had gotten over his first 3.5 years, run the Rose Garden strategy, and not try to court additional voters. There was always going to be a percentage of voters he was going to lose to Zephyr Teachout, or to Howie Hawkins, or to Rob Astorino.
I think Moreland. I think it was Moreland. Don't you think, Andrew, that finally people said, oh. See, we always knew the guy was the Prince of Darkness or whatever the nickname du jour is. Now he shut down his own commission. He's making his own set of rules. And finally, people we've had a ton of guests here who wouldn't have crossed him for 3 years. Then all of a sudden this year came around, and now they'll go on record as saying, see, he's making it up as he goes along. He's not reportable to anybody. How many times has he done an interview with you guys? And we'll put our hands down, not once, right? And then it fit the narrative. But because of time here, is Jimmy right that with all the disadvantages the Astorino campaign had, you can say no just before I even ask a question, no, but with all the disadvantages that the Astorino campaign had, they could have done more this cycle than they did. We know the guy who builds the ads. He's a nice guy. We sometimes say he's crazy, but the nuclear bomb, I mean, some of those ads were just, where are they going with?
I totally agree that Astorino hasn't taken full advantage of the openings that he's been provided by Cuomo. I think part of that speaks to the basic underlying message of the Astorino campaign, the whole winning or losing. I think a lot of people don't agree with the Astorino read on that the state is losing, or losing as dramatically as he keeps insisting that it is.
Depends where you are in the state.
Yeah, but
though,
I think most people think it's better off than it was 4 years ago, certainly better off than it was 6 years ago. The winning or losing metric, might not be a winner for Astorino.
And that goes right back to what I was saying, particularly when you look at, there's a number that most of the major polling outfits do, which is New York State on the right track or the wrong track? And it's a combination of two things, the pollsters will tell you. One, your economic outlook. And two, this basic idea, is the government functioning? Is it getting things done? Cuomo can certainly control the latter, and he makes a very credible argument that it has. The former, the economy, essentially Astorino was betting when he started this campaign, when he laid out this theme, that people wouldn't be sour on the economy. We had a pretty decent summer. The unemployment rate is going down in the state. Yeah, there's a lot of challenges remaining, particularly in some hard-hit upstate areas where I expect Astorino will do well, but you know, I don't know that New York is losing.
Really quickly, guys, just on the AG race, I think you ask most New Yorkers, they can name the name Preet Bharara before they can the Attorney General. I don't remember the last time we can name a U.S. Attorney before the New York Attorney General. Look at the launch that it did to the careers of Eliot Spitzer and our current governor. Schneiderman's probably going to win if you believe the polls here. I've been interested how many people have endorsed Cahill, though, as almost as an alternative. Is that more because the governor didn't let the Attorney General be the Attorney General, Ozzie, or is it because Schneiderman just didn't do as much as many people expect from the office?
Well, it's a mix. Remember, he was supposed to play a major role in bringing accountability to banks for the financial crisis. There was a very big announcement about it, and not many people have seen follow-through.
Yep.
The office was rearranged, thanks in part to Governor Cuomo forcing through change in how that office is structured through a budget agreement. So you get Preet Bharara, who's very aggressive in seeking attention for political corruption, which runs right up against what Andrew Cuomo talks about and gets a lot of attention with political reporters. And you have a first-term Attorney General who's still trying to figure out where can he get attention for the work that he's doing.
Real quickly, as a table, everybody thinks both the governor and the AG win going away Tuesday?
What about going away? I think that Cuomo will be a little bit lower than we expect. I don't know if he'll make 60% this time, given the kind of left
Over under
right
15
charge.
points, you take over or under?
Over what? His
Over
nearest
the
challenger?
margin, yeah.
He'll be over 15.
You agree too?
Agreed.
I'm very close to 15 right now.
No, nice hedge. Okay.
you.
When we come back here, we're going to talk about some other competitive races, this time on the congressional side. And usually, frankly, they're a whole hum. Not this time around. We're going to tell you some of the races we're keeping an eye on.